So I'm glad you all could join us this evening. I have a couple of announcements before we get started on the redistricting portion of the meeting. So I want to remind you that you're all invited to help Ginger McCall celebrate her 90th birthday. It will be Tuesday, April 27th at the LeClaire Park Band Shell, and she'll be there from 3 to 5 p.m. So drop by anytime between those hours. And then a recording of Monday's legislative hour that was hosted by the League of Women Voters of Illinois is on their website. And the topics included healthcare, criminal justice, and ballot access. Our representative, Katie Stewart, along with Senator Morrison, discusses the ballot access. Okay, and I would like to thank Barb Scott and Brent Langley for following this redistricting issue, and to Becky Ellis for making this program and our Zoom meeting possible. I'm sure you all know that after the census, the states redraw their state and congressional district lines. These districts determine how communities are represented at the local, state, and federal level. Redistricting is vulnerable to gerrymandering, which is the intentional manipulation of the redistricting process by the people in power, frequently to stay in power, or sometimes to reduce the political power of a certain racial group. So Barb and Brent will introduce the video that we'll be watching tonight.
So I was asked by the League of Women Voters of Edwardsville area to attend a briefing that was put on, coordinated by the League of Women Voters of the Wheaton area. And this particular video we chose to share with everybody because it does show some of the basic information that if you haven't been watching redistricting for years or any, you can kind of get an idea of what the basics are first. And also it talks about the differences that are going on this year because of the census. But it is being presented by Change Illinois, the organization Change Illinois, and not all of the views are completely aligned with the League of Women Voters of Illinois. Most of them are, but there are some that the League did not necessarily join up with. It was recorded on April 8th, which means it's a little old. Things are going really fast in the redistricting world right now. So after the video, I have a few updates that I can provide that I've been going to several other video sessions that might give you a little bit more recent picture of what's going on. So without any further ado, I turn it over to Becky to start the video.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen and start the video. And I'd like to ask all of you who haven't already to mute your microphones because it will help the sound come through from the computer better. And hold on to your hats. Here we go.
Now, I am honored to introduce Madeleine Dukechek, the Executive Director for Change Illinois, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that promotes ethics and efficiency in government, fair maps, and elections. Madeleine is a passionate, longtime advocate and champion of good government. She is a contributor to Crain's Chicago Business and has won multiple awards for her reporting and advocacy. Thank you so much, Madeleine, for being with us tonight so that we can all learn how to amplify our voices for fair redistricting maps together. Madeleine, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Barb, and to the League of Women Voters of Wheaton and the wonderful McCormick Foundation. We appreciate all of your support and help. I am happy to be with all of you this evening. And if you'll bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to attempt to share my screen and we'll go through some slides. Is that working for everybody?
It's working.
Awesome.
The
So why do we end? We need to end gerrymandering together, and it's going to be a challenge. It has been a challenge for many years, but we'll figure out a way to get through it if we work together. So again, as Barb said, my name is Madeleine Dukechek. I'm the executive director of Change Illinois, a nonpartisan nonprofit. I spent many years at the Daily Herald, so some of you may remember me from my time there. And I'm very happy to be with you tonight talking about the census, fair districts, gerrymandering, the Fair Maps Amendment, and other solutions to gerrymandering, and how you can get involved. So of course, it all really starts with the census, something that happens every 10 years. We go through the process of trying to count everyone in our country and everyone in our state. And we've had a lot of controversy about this past census, and as many of you probably already know, the census results have been extraordinarily delayed. We should already know by now, for instance, whether Illinois is going to lose 1 or 2 seats in Congress because of the census and our shrinking population, while other states' populations have been growing. We'll probably hear about that very soon in the next few weeks, but then we're not really expected to get full census data until there'll be what's called a legacy version of the data, probably in mid to late August, and then the full set of data at the end of September. So this has really thrown this redistricting cycle for a loop in many different ways, which we'll get into as we go. The census is, of course, a lot more than about just counting everybody. It is the building block for all of our resources in government and for our representation. It's used to build all of our political districts, not just for Congress, but also for our state house and our state senate, and in every county and every local government as well. So every single government is facing this task this year of redrawing all of the political boundaries to reflect the shifts in population. And in Illinois, it's important to note that historically it is that full set of census data that has been used to draw our districts. So as some of you may already know, what is the current process in Illinois? Well, the power lies with lawmakers, our elected state senators and state representatives. They are charged in our state constitution with drawing all new districts for both the Illinois House and the Illinois Senate and Congress. And so that is step 1. Step 2, once those maps are approved, they're sent to the governor. He can either sign the language that sets out those maps, or he can veto it. If he signs the maps into law, then they become our boundaries and our representation for the next 10 years. If he should veto the maps, then there could be a vote to try to override him. Or if for some other reason maps are not approved, the first deadline in our state constitution is June 30th. If maps are not approved by then a bipartisan split commission is created with 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. Those people appointed by the legislative leaders in the majority, so the Speaker of the Illinois House and the Senate President. And if they do not reach consensus and approve a map by the end of August, around about September 5th, our state constitution requires that the Supreme Court submit 2 names, put them in a crystal bowl or a replica of Abe Lincoln's stovepipe hat, and 1 name is pulled. The names are a Republican and a Democrat. Whichever name is pulled at random, then that party wins control of the whole shebang. and they get to pass their version of the maps, typically in a fashion that's going to help them preserve their political majorities, or at least strengthen them as much as possible. And so that is what we call gerrymandering, which I'm sure you've all heard about before, named for Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts, who started this whole thing off many hundreds of years ago. And so what is gerrymandering? It's essentially, drawing districts to strengthen your political hand. And so here's an example of how that works. We have on the left some precincts. 60% of them are blue, 40% of them are red. We know historically that, blue would be Democrat, red would be Republican. You can split them up in 5 different ways. And the end result would be that every seat would go to the Democrats. You can split them up another different way of 5 and end up with 3 Republican seats and 2 Democratic seats. So, lots of different ways to manipulate things. Whichever party tends to have the power tends to take advantage and draw the districts so that they can preserve and grow their majority, hang on to their political power, preserve their incumbency. And, I've been a lifelong Illinoisan. I don't know about the rest of you, but covered politics and Illinois state government for many years at the Daily Herald, and was doing it back after the 1990 census when Republicans actually won control. It's been Democrats ever since then, but there was a time back then when Republicans won control of this process and had their shot to draw maps, which actually resulted in a Republican House Speaker for just a couple of years before the Democrats took back control and Mike Madigan, our former House Speaker, took over once again. So what are some things that are wrong with the current process, and why should more of us get involved in fighting this and caring about this? In Illinois, the result of gerrymandering tends to contribute to what are sorely lacking in our elections. Lack competition. For the last several cycles, we have tallied up the numbers, and about half of the districts in our Illinois House and Illinois Senate literally only had one candidate running for office in the general election. When you factor in additionally those districts where somebody ends up winning by what's considered a landslide margin, where things are really not very competitive and everybody knows going in that that other candidate doesn't have the resources to run a strong campaign, that percentage jumps to 80% of the districts in Illinois, in the Illinois House and the Illinois Senate, where things are just not really competitive and we don't have any choices. So gerrymandering truly steals our voices and our choices. Another problem that gerrymandering contributes to is, as I've talked about here, it's all about self-preservation. And so when lawmakers are in control, they have, first of all, a huge conflict of interest in drawing their own districts and picking their own voters. And they do so to preserve their own political careers and lives. It's a natural tendency probably, but it's something that shouldn't be done. And, it tends to be, it is a form of voter suppression, I believe, when they're taking away all of our choices. And so, lots of states have started to move toward creating independent commissions. One that we have looked at a lot that did this after the 2010 census was California. And it turns out that when politicians were drawing districts before 2010, they were packing and cracking minority voters, people of color, communities of color. Because when the Independent Resident Commission drew maps in California after the 2010 census, 9 more people of color were elected to seats in California. Not insignificant in both the state districts in California and for Congress. More people of color were elected. You know, and when gerrymandering is done, we tend not to have much say. Things tend not to be done in a very transparent or accountable manner. We're seeing that play out now, frankly, in Illinois, and it's extremely disturbing. There's been 3 weeks of hearings so far. Most of them have been during most people's working hours. Many of them have been held at the exact same time. There have been very few people participating and testifying because there hasn't been very much publicity or outreach surrounding this. And so, you know, our elected officials are frankly patting themselves on the back, saying that they're holding more hearings than they've ever held before. And isn't that wonderful? They're breaking records with all of these hearings. But it's, you know, if a tree falls in the woods, does anyone hear it? You know, nobody knows about these hearings and very few people are participating. And essentially they're going to go back behind closed doors and draw our futures for the next 10 years. The Chicago Tribune editorial board in an editorial about a week ago said that sources told them that they already, in the Senate, they already have a map drawn. So what really is the point of these hearings? You have to question. The other thing that I want to talk about that I feel very strongly about when we engage in gerrymandering in Illinois and across the country, I think that very much contributes to the political polarization that we have been experiencing for some time now, that continues to just get worse and worse. You know, elected officials, when they are candidates and they're running for election, they're primarily concerned with whether they have a primary challenge. And so they're really appealing to the extreme wings of their parties when they're running, because that's the game for them. That's what they are most concerned with. And so we've got this system set up where we are tending to create a structure in which we are really pushing people to the extreme wings of their parties and creating a system where we don't speak to each other in civil tones anymore and try to work out compromises. This is a look, it's a little bit dated, of the situation across the nation with how districts are being drawn. And the red districts are those red states are those states where lawmakers are still in charge of the redistricting process. Virginia recently just approved, that's the part that's out of date, they did approve a form of more independent redistricting that is kind of a combination of residents and elected officials. But it's the green states that have independent commissions. Utah has a form of one as well. New York, Maine, Connecticut, Iowa, as we know, has a system where a demographer draws the districts in a nonpartisan fashion. Bunch of these states after the 2018 election were added to this map, including our neighbors in Michigan, who are now going through their first attempt with an independent commission. Missouri voters approved a more independent process, but then kind of took a step back after this last election cycle. So there's a power struggle going on there. And Utah and Colorado, after the 2018 election, also move to a more independent process. In Illinois, this is a situation where there is a major gulf between what the people want and what their elected officials are willing to let go of and give them, really. Ending gerrymandering long has had overwhelming support in our state. We commissioned a scientific survey a year ago. We purposefully hired a Democratic pollster who is used pretty broadly by Democrats in the state of Illinois, because we knew that we were dealing with a Democratic governor and Democratic controlled supermajorities in our Illinois House and Illinois Senate, and we wanted Democrats to trust the results. And that poll found that 75% of voters in Illinois of all parties and independents want an end to gerrymandering now. The Paul Simon Institute in Carbondale has done a survey and asked this question every year as well. It pretty regularly shows that about 2/3 of Illinois voters want an end to gerrymandering. Our poll showed an even higher historic level of support for ending gerrymandering. But the unfortunate reality, as I said, is that our Illinois politicians are pushing ahead now. Both the Senate and the Illinois House have launched into a series of hearings, and they start every hearing off by saying that they need to get maps drawn and approved before June 30th, because the Democrats in the supermajority do not want to give Republicans any chance at gaining control of this process. Unfortunately, the complicating factor this year, of course, is that we're not going to have census data by June 30th. So what are we basing the drawing of these districts on? We did hear one senator actually say that they were planning to base these districts on what is known as ACS data. The American Community Survey is a questionnaire survey that the census conducts on a rolling basis every year. It's of a small sampling of people in the country. It's never been meant to be, it's very useful information, but it's never was intended to be used for redistricting or drawing political districts. But the best indication that we have been able to get is that the Democrats intend to use that data and data from the last census in 2010 to draw maps and try to push them through by June 30th. So we, of course, all ought to be very concerned about that, because there is a very strong chance that many of us will not be counted, that we will literally be erased and not counted in these maps. The ACS data only goes down to the block group level. It doesn't go down to the block level. And so there could be thousands of people who will be literally left out as a result of them using that data instead of the full census data. This is very much a concern amongst advocates for communities of color, and something that, frankly, all of us ought to be alarmed about. So, as I said, lawmakers are pushing ahead. We have historically at Change Illinois, with our wonderful partners at the League of Women Voters, been pushing for a Fair Maps amendment to our state constitution, which would put the authority to draw districts into the hands of regular residents of the state of Illinois. We've not succeeded. Last year, the pandemic put an end to our efforts. This year, as I've said, they're proceeding and holding these hearings, trying to get maps drawn as quickly as they can. We did introduce two bills, HB 3581 and SB 2554. They are essentially identical, that contain several provisions to try to promote using best practice nationwide principles for fair mapping, and to really try to set the standard for the kind of transparency and accountability that should be in this process, to make sure, for instance, that map makers prioritize the Federal Voting Rights Act and the Illinois Voting Rights Act as they're drawing districts. And we've been also advocating for, in the last session before this new sessions, the new General Assembly started this year, in one of the bills that the Black Caucus pushed and got approved and signed into law, in that criminal justice omnibus bill that they had, we were actually successful in getting language in it to end prison gerrymandering in Illinois. What's prison gerrymandering? A lot of people have not really heard much about that before, but it's essentially this practice that we have in most places around the country, where we are counting people who are incarcerated at their temporary prison addresses rather than their permanent home addresses. And so for reasons of systemic historical racism, most of the people in our prisons are people of color. The average sentence that they serve is of just a little over 2 years, but we're counting them in downstate prisons instead of in their home communities, which tend to be more urban, for 10 years. And so their representation is being stolen from them. I don't know about you, but I have never heard of an elected official holding a town hall in a prison so that he or she could respond to his incarcerated constituents. So that is something that we actually were successful in getting signed into law, but at the very last minute, in literally 4 o'clock in the morning or thereabouts, somebody changed some wording in this language and made the effective date for ending prison gerrymandering in 2025. So it's not going to really end until 2030, unless we can do something about it before these maps are approved. So we have been testifying at all of these hearings that have been held so far and talking about that at many of them as well. So it's obviously not going to be possible this year again for us to achieve that Fair Maps amendment. And so, as I said, we did introduce some other legislation to try to push for a more transparent process, a more accountable process, and continue to testify about some of these things at all of these hearings. Would love to have all of you join us, as the hearings are going to continue for some time, at least another 10 or 11 days. What are we asking for? We're asking, first of all, for our own elected officials to tell us what the process is going to be after they are done with these hearings. We've asked this until we're blue in the face and we don't get any answers. We have asked that any maps that are drafted, even drafts of maps, be released to the public so that we all can see them, respond to them, understand them, and ask questions about them. Nothing so far. We've asked that at every hearing we've been at, if we could please slow this process down and provide 2 weeks notice for all future public hearings, so that we can work very hard to spread the word about the hearings and get people participating and engaged and aware of them. We've heard from lots of people that they would like to participate, but they haven't been able to arrange time off from their day jobs to do this. And most of these hearings, as I said, are being held during working hours you know, when most people are at their 9-to-5 jobs. We have asked for a 2-week period between the introduction of final map proposals and votes on those proposals, so that, again, all of us can inspect these maps, think about them, process them, digest them, understand them, and provide some feedback to lawmakers. They ought to propose these maps and give everybody a chance to respond, hold several more hearings, get input from all of us and respond to that input, maybe make some changes in the maps. That's exactly what happened in California in 2011. We heard from commissioners who participated in that process then that when they first introduced their maps, they got all kinds of negative feedback about certain things that they had done. And they went back to the drawing board and made some changes and approved maps, as I said, that actually elected more people of color in California, and B, actually the percentage of Democrats elected went up in California, not down, after independent commissioners drew the maps. Democrats already had a majority, and those numbers increased by a percentage point or two after independent mapping occurred. So we ought to have time to respond and react, but historically what has happened is that the maps are unveiled on the second to last day of the spring legislative session at the end of May, or the last day of session at the end of May. And they very quickly get voted, called for votes, and rammed through the process as quickly as lawmakers can make it happen, so that none of us have a time to study those maps, ask questions, or get any answers. And so we've been hollering about that at every one of these hearings that we can make time to show up for. All of these map proposals ought to be accompanied by a compliance report that literally explains how they were drafted, how they abide by the federal voting rights and state voting rights acts, how they have incorporated the public input and feedback that they've been getting at these hearings, so that we all understand what's been done and what's going on. Unfortunately, none of these things are happening so far. And I know it's frustrating, but if more of us don't start speaking up, it's not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. So I would ask all of you to consider joining us in making your voice heard. There are a number of ways you can do that. At the same time that we have been running from one virtual hearing to another, we've also been engaging since the beginning of this year in training sessions with neighbors, friends, families, community groups, neighborhood organizations, all over the state, teaching them about this process. And in partnership with the Princeton Gerrymandering Project, we are using their Representable website and have launched a We Draw the Lines campaign. So if any of you would like to follow up with me after this session this evening, we're happy to do one of these training sessions with you. We'll take you through the process of what remapping is all about and get you thinking about your very own community, what characteristics make up that community, and expose you to some mapping software that would allow you to take a turn and try your hand at drawing your community of interest. You can then save that map and submit it to the Illinois Senate and the Illinois House to be considered by the map makers. There are also, we've made so many leaps and bounds with technology that there are many other free tools available out there for people to use this time around. There's mapping software called Districtar There's something called District Builder. There's something that's known as DRA, or Dave's Redistricting app. All of those are free to use. There's also something called the National Data Redistricting Hub that has and will have lots of census data for people to use, and some of these tools available to them so that they can take a stab at creating their own maps. Now, I just want to explain quickly that representable website that we are working with allows you to draw not an entire map full of political districts, but your own community of interest. And some of these other software applications that I've mentioned do allow you to draw an entire map full of political districts. You can also make your voice heard by showing up at these public hearings that have been going on for about 3 weeks now. They're scheduled to continue. Let me show you a look at what this has been like here very quickly. This is a document that we have put together of all of the hearings in the Illinois House and the Illinois Senate. They started on April 1st. Fools are we. And it's literally been nonstop. Multiple hearings on the same day, some of them literally at the same time. There have been at least a couple of occasions when the Illinois House has had remapping hearings going on with the same committee members at the same time in 2 different virtual rooms. So we've seen some Republican lawmakers complaining about that. The Senate started some hearings back in March and have been going nonstop. There's more hearings tomorrow. There's some over the weekend. There's a slew next week and running up and through April 17th. So there are still plenty of opportunities for all of you to make your voices heard. That's a look at that. Let me flip back over to the slideshow, which I'm going to have trouble doing because the screen share is blocking it. So bear with me for 1 second. There we go. So what do you need to do if you want to participate in these hearings? You need to go to the Illinois General Assembly website, which is ilga.gov. Look up House committees or Senate committees, find the redistricting committees, figure out which hearing you want to attend, and do not concern yourself. There are weird, vague geographies attached to these committees, but I wouldn't worry about that. If you can make it to a hearing and it says it's for Carbondale, but you live in Wheaton, go ahead anyway and give them an earful, because they've done a very inadequate job of describing what people, well, they've done no job of describing what people should show up for which geography and which hearing. So, feel free to hit anyone you can make it to. You would then need to fill out a witness slip to let them know that you intend to testify. If you cannot make the hearing, but you still would like to make your voice heard, you can click a box on the witness slip to provide written testimony, and then you can email it to the appropriate committee. I've got the addresses here for those committees. The Senate is Redistricting Committee at senatedem.ilga.gov. The House is Redistricting Committee at hds.ilga.gov. And if you do sign up to provide oral testimony, what has generally been happening is that you will get an invitation with a Zoom link right before the hearing or the morning of the hearing, if you, let them know in advance that you would like to testify. And sometimes you have to literally email those addresses and say, hey, I didn't get the link yet. That's happened to us a few times. So persistence is important. So another way you can make your voice heard is to help build pressure on our elected officials by contacting them and letting them know that you're not happy with the way this is going. But also by writing a letter to the editor and calling out our elected officials that way. Pick your favorite local media outlet and write something up telling them that you're not happy about this situation, that you feel like your votes and voices are being suppressed, and that it's well past time that we can do better in the state of Illinois. We've had major change in leadership, and yet the same power grabs are being conducted as we speak. So if you are going to write a letter to the editor, you're generally better off if you keep it to 200 words or less. Definitely keep it to under 300 because space is at a premium in at least the print editions of the papers, and you'll have a much better shot of getting your letter published and accepted if it's short, succinct, sweet, and to the point. There are ways for getting involved. Please, please, please follow us. Our website is changeil.org. You can follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @ChangeIllinois if you're into the Twitter thing. We're also on Facebook at Change Illinois. And again, that We Draw the Lines community mapping drive, if any of you are interested in that, please feel free to shoot me an email. When we're done, I can be reached at mdoubek at changeil, I almost said Daily Herald, at changeil.org. Again, really important that all of us rise up and demand that we get the representation we deserve and keep fighting. I know many of you have been in this fight since 2016, maybe even earlier, when the league first tried to pass independent maps and fair mapping, and it gets very disheartening and frustrating. But we've got to just keep getting more people into this fight with us to improve our chances of success. Happy to answer any questions you may have, and thank you for bearing with me through all of this. And I will quit sharing my screen so that I can see all of you.
Thank you so much. One question that I have, and since I'm moderating, I'll ask my question first, is if these maps are drawn and adopted by June 30th, and then the census material comes out in September, what's going to happen if the actual census data doesn't jive with the maps? Will they go to court? And the second part of my question is, candidates for the primary of 2022 will start getting petitions out in September. So what do you see and what do you envision happening?
I absolutely believe that we are headed for litigation. I believe that Democrats intend to try to pass maps by June 30th. If it's based on, this whole situation is a little tricky because, as we all know, this past census was pretty controversial. There were lots of fits and starts over it and lawsuits filed about it. At one point, the previous administration was trying to push to only count citizens. That became a big controversy and issue. So, there may be some people out there for whom sampling ACS data might show a better outcome, right? Because what we know and are expecting from the census is that the Black population in Illinois in the urban areas has been shrinking. The Latino population is growing, but not as fast as it has been. And the Asian population is growing. You know, how much that all is going to play out, we don't know yet. But, you know, our belief is that, and what in fact, the National Conference of State Legislatures has testified to and recommended to lawmakers all across this country is that they ought to be going to the courts and asking for permission to set aside these constitutional deadlines so that they have the time to wait for the full census data and make sure that they're drawing maps that count everyone as best we can, and go from there. Now that would, in Illinois' case, require changing the filing deadlines for candidates and perhaps pushing back the primary, which, you know, a lot of us think would be a good side benefit because, you know, is it really a good idea to be having primary elections in March in Illinois in the middle of usually a pretty bitter winter? No. So I fully expect that there is going to be lawsuits over all of this, and maybe we will get lucky and you know, a judge may order that some of the lines be redrawn or altered in some way. We will have to wait and see. But you know, if Illinois and other states don't wait for that full census data, we're risking one of the very foundational principles our democracy is built on, which is one person, one vote.
Is it feasible to have a constitutional amendment, an Illinois constitutional amendment to require them to use the census data for at least in future times? Because it's not now outlined in the Illinois Constitution that they must use census data.
That's correct. Historically, however, they have used census data, and that is something that was pointed out to them in each chamber when they kicked off these hearings. The National Conference of State Legislatures had a couple of people come and kind of go through the whole mess for the lawmakers and explain it to them and explain the situation and present them with options. And the National Conference of State Legislatures said, you know, yes, it's not specifically in your constitution that you have to use census data to draw your maps, but that is in fact what has been your practice historically. And so that's something that could be used in future litigation and raised as an issue. This has been your past practice. How can you divert from it now? It's a great idea to consider an amendment to insist that they use the census data. It's not something that I had thought of, but it's certainly something worth weighing.
Thank you. We do have a question about how much advance public notice is ILGA required to give before a redistricting hearing? I mean, I'm assuming as announcement, and then to expand on that, someone asked how much notice do they have to give to cancel a meeting?
I'm not aware of what the rule is for canceling the meetings. They have been in the House providing more notice than in the Senate. They have been providing a couple weeks notice in the House. The Senate was initially 6 days in advance. Again, it's like, you know, if you post it but don't really tell anyone about it or promote it in any way where real people pay attention in their daily lives, are you really promoting it? There's been, you know, yesterday I was monitoring a hearing in the Senate for Lake County in Grays Lake, and there were some people physically present at this hearing in Grays Lake, and a young man stood up and said that he had asked and gotten an answer. They're not answering any of our questions, but they answered his question about how many people had testified so far at these Senate hearings, and the answer was 45. for a state of 12 million people. And the young man pointed out that that is fewer than the number of senators we have in the state Senate, which is 59.
I hope they noticed the irony of his statements.
Yeah, I haven't, there's no shaming our elected officials for the most part in Illinois. I have to say, they don't really seem to be, they've been well trained to just listen to what everybody has to say and not answer any questions or provide very much feedback.
Someone messaged a question about what state do you feel has an ideal process going on right now of those that have independent mapping process?
You know, some of the states are really just getting into this for the first time, so it's hard to say. I know probably the most about California because I spent quite a bit of time with a couple of the commissioners from the 2011 resident redistricting commission who came to Illinois and did a little mini speaking tour a couple years ago. I think that process, you know, it wasn't easy by any stretch. The commissioners would tell you that that there were factions of them and that they fought with one another and got quite a bit of feedback from constituents. And, you know, it certainly isn't easy to conduct an independent redistricting process in a state as large as California. They were, you know, talking about having to travel all over the place because that was, of course, pre-pandemic. I happen to have a niece who was involved in bringing independent redistricting to Colorado, and they're just getting going there now. They actually have two commissions, one for their congressional districts and a second one for their state districts. And so I'm interested to see how that all goes and turns out. They've already, in fact, just this week, voted unanimously to get rid of one of the commission chairs because he had posted on social media some things questioning the legitimacy of our last election in November.
Catherine's asking the question, is there hope with new legislators? My impression locally is that they want to do the right thing.
You know, it's interesting because even those who have supported Fair Maps Amendment legislation in the past and those who have been champions for us are, you know, in some cases chairing some of these hearings and are insisting that that it's their duty to get these maps drawn by June 30th, and would we have them violate the Constitution, ignoring, you know, this other path, which would involve seeking permission from a court to extend the deadlines or ignore the deadlines in this extraordinary situation.
Well, and as you said earlier, I think the Constitution says that if a map is not drawn by June 30th, it goes to an independent commission, correct, to draw?
No, it does not go to an independent commission. It goes to a bipartisan backup commission.
Okay.
So 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, and that has happened 4 times previously, and nearly every time when that has happened, it has gone to the picking a name out of a hat situation. That split commission has, you know, never agreed to compromise maps, and so they've had to pick the name out of the hat and give a 50-50 shot to one of the 2 parties to gain complete control. There is, I should mention that there is some legislation that was introduced a week and a half ago by Senator Jason Barackman. A lot of Republicans have been talking about it. Jason Barackman is a Republican from Central Illinois, and the rhetoric has been that this is the Fair Maps Amendment in legislative form. And, you know, to a certain extent that is true, but we have not supported it because we're concerned that it is not compliant with the Constitution, it would create an independent commission, and then the commission would draw maps and hold hearings, and after the census data arrives, and hand that over to the backup commission to approve. But there's nothing in that legislation that would force that backup commission to wait for the independent commission's work product. And so in fact, the Constitution still prevails, and the Constitution says the backup commission is supposed to draw maps.
There's been several questions skirting around the issue of federal legislation at the federal level that would solve some of the problems for all the states. Do you see any of that on the horizon? Is there anything in HR 1 that's included about redistricting?
HR 1, in fact, does include a provision that would mandate that congressional districts be drawn by independent commissions nationwide. And one of the arguments that we hear a lot for not ending gerrymandering is, why should we quit doing it when everyone else is doing it? And, you know, there are more of them doing it than there are of us. So that would solve that problem. It has been approved by the US House, but, you know, the situation in the United States Senate is a bit tenuous right now. So we'll see what happens there. It definitely would remove that argument that, you know, I'm not going to disarm until my neighbors disarm as well. I just, you know, don't happen to personally think that's a, you know, we all learn as kids, just because somebody else does something wrong doesn't mean you should keep doing it wrong too, right?
Right, right, thank you. Well, and I do have one last question, but I'm going to put Will on the spot.
Hey, Barbara, let me just add to on that whole HR 1 thing, you know, everybody should be aware that we have a new chair of the Democratic Party of Illinois, right? Because Mike Madigan is now gone, right? So the new chair of the Democratic Party is US House of Representatives Rep. Robin Kelly from South Suburban Madison. She supports HR 1 and independent redistricting and voted for it, as did every other Democratic member of the US House from Illinois. So we have this disconnect here where at the national level, Democrats are saying they want independent commissions, but here within Illinois, the Democratic supermajorities are plowing ahead, trying to keep their control and grow their power.
Somehow, I think we could all become famous if we could figure out how to connect those two. I'm not sure. Before I ask Will his pop question of the evening, Madeleine, what are the three most important, just to sum up, what are the three most important things people should be saying at the commission, at the hearings, if they choose to testify?
Please don't rush through a map. Give us time to see it, understand it, and ask questions about it. We need at least a 2-week period of time, if not more, from when you finally unveil those maps and when you vote on them. We need a compliance report. And why aren't you waiting for the census data?
Okay.
So that everyone counts.
Thank you. Now, Will, are you ready for your pop question? I see David has joined you, just in case you need a backup and need to ask an expert, okay?
I mean, he'll be my informal phone call, right?
Yes, yes.
Your lifeline?
My lifeline, yes.
Yeah. We've had several questions regarding how Colonel McCormick would feel about an independent map support. Knowing you are our resident historian on Colonel McCormick, how would he feel about an independent map?
Now, before I answer the question, you may notice that Colonel McCormick is pictured
right over your shoulder.
There he
So
is.
He's watching this answer.
Doesn't make me nervous at all. Colonel McCormick was all about, you know, fair representation in government. He certainly has his own personal political leanings, but despite that, he was all about, the special nature of a democracy and keeping the democracy alive through informed, engaged citizens. If you look at our foundation mission, that's part of it. And our foundation mission is a continuation of what Colonel McCormick believes. So when you talk about gerrymandering or fair districting, I don't have direct knowledge of what he felt about that, but I can give you an idea of how he would feel about it. I mean, he wanted everyone to be represented in government. He wanted folks to vote. He wanted folks to be informed when they voted. So if I had to guess, and David, I think back me up on this or not, I think that he would support the idea of having maps be coalesced or coordinated with census data. I think he'd want that type of system, a system that's fair, a system that's just. I believe that's what Mr. McCormick would promote.
You got a thumbs up from David, so
Oh.
I think you did well.
All right, I was nervous.
Madeleine, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I hope everyone will heed your advice and that we all get involved. After witnessing the poor turnout on Tuesday's election results, it's time for us all to get involved and make sure that we have fair districts and we have districts that represent us correctly. So thank you once again. We applaud you taking your time to be with us. Thank you so much. And good night, everybody. And hope you'll join us next month as I turn this meeting now over to Judy Beaver, our president of the League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Barb. And again, I want to echo Barb's words about thank you.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
I can't tell if you can hear me, and I have had problems with my mic in the past. I just want to take a few minutes to kind of update you on things. One is that she talked about the hearings ending middle April, but I just checked today, and there are 5 more hearings coming up on Saturday, 4/24, Monday, 4/26, Thursday, 4/29, Friday, 4/30, and Saturday, 5/1. If you need more specifics about that, we can send them to you in an email. But they are found at ilga.gov under committee hearings, redistricting. She stressed, and she said that you don't have to go to one for your area. Brent and I did attend one for the area we used to live in a few years ago. And it was mostly about, they have this introduction about what's going on. And then they have people provide witness, oral testimony. And the people we saw were from the NAACP and several other groups from that area. And mostly they were saying the same kinds of things that she was saying. We got to have fair maps. You got to make certain they're fair. You got to make certain they're fair. That's really what they're saying. Now, there's other alternatives. In order to provide, I asked my representative, how should I provide written testimony? Because when I was going through the witness slip area, it wasn't very clear how you did that. And there are 2 addresses, one for the House and one for the Senate, where you can send your written comments. And the League of Women Voters IL have provided us with things that they feel strongly about. And they also feel strongly, like the Change Illinois, for having a public hearing after the introduction of the final map. They've had lots and lots of hearings, and they're still having more hearings, but it's before we even know what they're doing. They're supposedly collecting data. Well, what are they doing with this generic data of you gotta have fair maps? They also have a website, ildems.com/redistricting. And that website does allow you to draw your own map. It uses the tool that she referenced, to draw your own map of community interest or actual district map. It gives you a chance to do that on the Illinois Dems website. What they'll do with that, I don't know, but they do allow you to submit maps if you want to. I've added a link on our website about redistricting that actually shows you how to use that one community of interest map drawing tool that she referenced. It goes through a lesson of doing that. And that's on our website under redistricting. She mentioned that there were two bills that were submitted, HB 3581 and SB 2554, specifically for creating a 12-member commission to do this fair mapping. The House bill was sent to the Rules Committee on March 27th, and the Senate bill, as of February 25th, still was not assigned to any committee. So obviously that was not going to be pushed through or try to get a committee working. Brent and I also attended a briefing that I have posted on our website from Ballotpedia, and they talked about a few things that were interesting. One thing I just wanted to mention was that normally the census is received by the 31st of March. So you have all that data so you could start creating the maps based on the census. And as she pointed out in the video, now we're not going to get anything until mid to late August, and that's the legacy format, which is not as usable as the final format, but they call it the granule, and that's not until the 30th of September. So it's just a rough way, you know, they've got to have something ready to go theoretically by the dates that they have driven by the Constitution, June 30th, or else we still have to have something to go by September 30th. So it's really kind of, they're tied in a bind of, I don't know how they can do it without changing the law. The HR1, which of course is S1 now, HR1 got passed, mandates using a non-politician commission for redistricting. It prohibits making a district that is more desirable for one political party, and it provides uniform instructions for making district maps. So had that passed, you know, it's possible we could do something this time, but it's still not passed, so I don't know. There are several lawsuits in other states. All of them are pending. Nothing's been done. Some of them are trying to postpone the deadline. Most of them are trying to postpone the deadline. Some of them are just trying to postpone it for one period. Some of them are trying to postpone it based on when they actually get the data. So if they get it by September 30th, then it's some date, and if it's another date, then it's another date. All of it is pending. Illinois, there's one for Alabama that to postpone the timeline, and 16 states filed amicus briefings with Alabama, but Illinois was not one of them. So they are really pushing to just get this map out there based on the Constitution telling them they've got to do it. Ballotpedia estimates that based on what they know right now, I don't know where they get this data, but that the changes in the Congress would be that Florida and Texas would both get 2 more House seats. Colorado, Montana, North Carolina, and Oregon would all get 1 new House seat. And the losses would be New York State would lose several. They don't know how many, they're estimating. And the rest of these states would lose 1 to 2. California, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and West Virginia. So based on whatever Ballotpedia is using for their figures, they're saying that that's the kind of changes that will happen. Any other questions or anything we could try to clarify if you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, but I looked in on two of the hearings. One was up in Rockford on Friday, and Saturday morning was down at Carbondale. And the only people there were very few people who spoke, who came, and the main emphasis is fighting that ACS survey.
Yeah.
That's what they were testifying to. No one there presented a map. And I think, speaking for myself, I thought, I didn't realize that we could figure out a map to do this, type thing. But anyway, I tried to get in on the one Monday evening. I could not get in on that.
Yeah, we tried to, and we couldn't either. And
Yeah.
I was suspicious of that because some of the announcements for that meeting said it was not going to be made available virtually. And others did say, so I thought maybe it'll be there, maybe it won't, and it wasn't.
So I was curious about that. But as I said, and at both of these that I looked in on, that was all the emphasis, was all the hard work these groups, different groups of people had gone out to get people to fill out the census, and now it's not being used. And several people, they were very upset about that, but they really didn't go into anything else. So
Yeah,
that's exactly what we heard too.
right. And it was pointed out, like in Carbondale, their city is split as far as senators. And that was one of the things they were arguing against, but the Republican chair of that committee pointed out that those lines were drawn by the Democrats in 2010. And he named the senators that were there at that time who wanted to protect their districts. I just thought it was interesting.
So, Joanne, you think we will want to send out a note to everybody about sending an email saying we'd like to have things that League of Women Voters IL want us to say?
Yeah, I think if you specifically say what we need to say, you know what I'm trying to say. So
Right.
People don't have to come up exactly what to say.
Yeah.
I guess.
Like gobbledygook, but whatever.
Yeah, Barb, it's Carol. I didn't try to leave and see if I could get my picture back for fear that I wouldn't be able to get back in. But that email that you sent that had the addresses and then it had some specific points to make. Can we make that available?
Yeah, that is, I pulled that from the League of Women Voters issues listing of what they feel we should be asking for. So I pulled it directly from League of Women Voters IL. So I know they support that. Now, I guess we could say to the people, if you want to add something else as this is their personal email to the group, they can say something else, what they feel like, but this is what the IL folks say we should be asking for.
Okay, so you would look at League of Women Voters of Illinois under what?
Well, my proposal, they sent out this issue for redistricting.
Yes.
And so I was just going to say, this is what they're asking for. So I'm proposing that I would draft an email, then give everybody the two addresses you send it to for the House, one for the Senate. And these are the issues that the League of Women Voters of IL support, asking for you to ask for.
I think that's a great idea, and it's very specific and easy because a lot of the stuff around redistricting is very large and fuzzy. And so give people something very specific that they can do.
I don't know how we can force them to have a hearing after they do their maps, but that's really what we need to have. All these hearings beforehand, to me, have been kind of wasted.
Yes.
It's like reporting, okay, I had so many meetings. You asked me to have so many meetings, so I had them. But
I
it's,
think that's what happened, yes. That's
yeah,
right.
it doesn't do any good if you don't have anything to comment on. And I did take the class that I have posted on our website on how to draw a map. And I was like, huh? They want you to, well, this was how to draw a map for your community, a community of interest. So you could say, well, these groups of people should be combined. And I thought, I've lived a lot of places in my life and I've never analyzed the area like that. I've never sat down and said, well, this road here makes it one person, one community of interest on this side, and that road over there is a different community of interest. I just don't have the knowledge or the expertise to do something like that.
I don't think most people do, but some of it seems to me like common sense. I don't think the community should be split.
This is Carol June. I think if you lived in a community where that happened, you would be much more aware of it. You know, if you lived in,
That's possible.
right, we just, you know, that's not here so much, but they really split up those communities sometimes, and then you would know what that means.
Yeah. But I mean, everybody has the opportunity, everybody at that website, everybody has the opportunities to submit a map if they want to.
But
They have
really,
the expertise.
ultimately, how many people do you think are going to submit a map?
And when the lady from Change Illinois said that only 54 people or 49 people had testified, I don't
Yes.
think that was, I think what you have to understand is they were testifying for groups. They were testifying for the NAACP in the Rock Island area.
Yes,
So
they were, right.
it just because
And
only
also
40,
in Carbondale with the NAACP.
so I just feel like there's been a lot more testimony, but everything that I have heard has been, you have to make it fair. You have to make it fair, not specifically draw this line here.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm still confused now. Would the Illinois Supreme Court have the power to change that June 30th deadline?
I don't see how they could.
Don't know if they could change it. Could they set it aside? She spoke as if that might be a possibility.
But how can you just decide, just lay it?
Yeah, to delay it.
Do we have an attorney here? No, we don't.
I
was
can
curious.
tell you
about
that is what all these other lawsuits are doing in Ohio, Alabama, Oregon, Texas. That's what they're all doing. They're all having a lawsuit that says, you know, delay.
Or-
We want to prove that we need to delay this. And what's happening is nothing's happening. They're just all
We don't
pending.
know in all those states that it's a state constitution.
Well, the
issue.
Oregon, I know, was state constitution
Okay.
says the maps have to be drawn by 1 July.
Okay.
And if not, the Secretary of State will decide by August 15th. And the Secretary of State has asked for an extension to September 27th.
We also don't know if, even though there are lawsuits, if they'll be successful.
Right.
That's the question.
It's just
yeah.
really late to be
Technical.
doing a lawsuit that's taking
I
months
don't
and months and
really,
months.
I was curious about that because I didn't know who would have the jurisdiction to overturn something that's in the Constitution.
Well, it's not overturning, it's delayed.
Delay. All right, then maybe that's the wrong word I'm using here.
I think that is, if we were talking about this last year,
Mhm.
there might have been a chance to get some kind of legislation stuff done so they can change it. But I don't know how we can do it because if they don't have those maps drawn by June 30th, it gets really complicated.
I think you have a stronger case if the Constitution required the redistricting to be done using census data, but it doesn't require that.
It doesn't say the census data. No, it doesn't. It just says it has to be done by June 30th.
Just between us, and I raised this with the Katie Stewart thing we went to, we sat in on. Given that we might not be able to influence too much what's going to go on this cycle, we got 10 more years now for the next one, for some independent evaluator to look at what these states have done that have gone to independent commissions, see which one of those worked the best and adopt something similar for Illinois. So we don't go through this again in 10 years.
Which would happen if HR1 was signed. If HR1 and
That might
S1.
be. That might be.
Yes, that's what I was just gonna say. If that passes, then some things will have to change.
Well, I think it'll change, you know, when the league and all the different organizations collected all those petition signatures, enough to get it put on the ballot, but Madigan, you know, but they threw a bunch out and everything.
That was the Supreme Court who threw it out.
The Supreme Court threw it out, said there weren't enough.
No, that they weren't valid. And it was a split decision of the Supreme Court.
I was
It
thinking,
wasn't unanimous,
I
but it
was
carried
thinking-
by one justice. But I remember in league, we were celebrating, I guess that was the 60th anniversary or something in 2016 when that came up on the ballot. And we were collecting signatures down at Sacred Grounds. And, you know, to get it on the ballot. And I remember it was some attorney, I don't know who it was, but I could tell by the way he was dressed, etc., was there. And he said, you know, this would pass if it could ever get on the ballot. He said,
right, and I think they even,
you're not going to get
Didn't-
it on the ballot. And I
didn't
just
they
thought that
collect
was very
enough?
instructive that he said that.
Didn't they collect enough twice? That's what I was gonna say, if it got on the ballot now, but, because I thought Madigan had something to do with the first part about blocking it, but maybe not, and then,
I don't know about that. I just heard the man say at one of these hearings that it did not pass. One Supreme Court justice voted enough in the majority to get it off the ballot. So it's never been on the ballot.
Is there any more discussion?
I just want to let you know that when we talked to Katie Stewart about 2 weeks ago, and we brought this up, she said, this is, you know, just her viewpoint. She said that the new Speaker of the House and Governor Pritzker have both sworn that they're going to draw fair maps.
Mhm.
So whatever that's worth, that's what they're saying. They're saying that they're going to try to draw fair maps.
Well, then I guess you need to look at them very carefully.
I'd like to see them after they drew, you know, somebody knowledgeable, look at them after they're drawn and say, did they do that?
But we
or
need to
not?
encourage them. Maybe we should, you know, email them and give them some encouragement.
It's hard
Well,
for
sure,
someone in
because
power to
it's
say they
hard.
use fair maps. Once you're already in power, you just want to hold on to power.
Right.
That's a
So
problem.
it does, the League of Women Voters of IL does say that they want to have written evidence, the final proposed maps meet Federal Voting Rights Act and Illinois Voting Rights Act standards, ensures effective representation of racial and linguistic minorities, and provides for preservation and protection of community stakeholders. So that's one of the things that they want us to ask for them to demand, you know, for us to demand of our legislature. So I'll put that all in the email and I'll send it to, should I send it to everybody right away? Or do you want me to, I kind of given a draft to you and Joanne and Carol already.
Just go ahead and send it.
Yeah,
to
go ahead and send it.
Okay, we'll do. I'll do that tomorrow then.
me. The other question I have for you, Barb, is I know you've been following the fiscal policy thing. And I got that message and I filled out a witness slip. And so that hearing is tomorrow. So if any of you were here tonight, you know, you really should do that, that we support that.
and what one is that? What's that?
Tomorrow morning at 8:30, there's a hearing on the governor's budget proposal.
Oh, yeah, I already did that one,
And-
okay.
Okay, and the League of Women Voters says, please fill in the fifth and do a proponent for it. And then I have been told by both Senator Crow and Representative Stewart that those witness slips really are powerful. And I have actually gone to two training sessions from Katie Stewart. She's training her constituents on how to fill out those witness slips. So I'm proposing that possibly that might be something that we might want to have as a meeting some night, just to teach our members how to fill out.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
That was a good idea.
Yeah, great idea.
It
'Cause
really
once you
doesn't
do it and once you sign up and get an account, it's easy. But until you do that, there's a couple of little things you can screw up that really mess it up and you can't figure out what you did.
And the hardest part that I found in the time I've been trying to do it is knowing where you can click to fill out the witness slip. Knowing what committee is the bill being looked at and
Yes.
when is it being looked at? And,
Yes.
you know, if it's not for that committee on that date, then you go and try to fill out the witness slip and it's not there and you can't even fill out a witness slip.
So,
So
I mean, it was helpful for you, for us, because you sent us the link. So it was-
exactly.
Yeah.
It is
So
also,
therefore, even I could fill this out and send it. So whatever.
it's really helpful if different times when something's up, if you post it so that other people can, because sometimes you don't follow something and then it's like you missed it. So if somebody has something, if they post it and say, hey, they're voting on that. I know they just did that for the bill, Moms Demand Action. They sent that out, they put this, they included the witness slip, and so it's right there for you, so you get more people to do it. So maybe that's what we need to do is when there's something coming up, share it with everybody.
I've
think-
noticed that I've noticed that when we get those time for actions from the League of Women Voters IL, that, I mean, I can't find a way to do a witness slip. I guess the only way you can support it is to call your representative and senator, because it's not, I've looked, the last 10 that we got, I went with every single one of them up, and there is no hearing set up for those bills.
But they just want you to encourage your rep to vote. for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Well, does every bill have to have a hearing? I do not know.
That is another talk that I would like to see, is how is the bill passed? Where, you know, the whole process, because I know something I was advocating on, stopping the burning of PFAS, you know, like someone introduces the bill and then they had, I forgot what they call it, something I never heard of, you know, and then it goes, so you do a witness slip on it and then they go through and they amend it. And then, or they goes to a different committee, then you have to do a different witness slip. It has a different number, you know, but I don't know all of those different things that they have to go through. I learned.
Sometimes they also have it, something scheduled, they reschedule it, so then they get rid of all the witness slips. And I know I was at something that they were voting on, and a gentleman did over 300 of them himself. And so
Oh.
they actually threw all of them out that he had. So, you know, and they'll let you know if you know, voted for more than one time, I believe. The other day,
Yes.
I thought it was a different bill and I didn't look at the last number and they were different. And I did that the other day. So it showed up that I already had done it. So that's good. They did not have that. I'd never seen that before. So
I think that this new myilga.gov, you know, MY in front of it, must be new, because before I was doing my witness slips just at ilga.gov, and I didn't have any problem finding it. I would type in the bill and then it would pop up. But now to do the witness slip, you got to go to myilga.gov, and it's a little bit more complicated. You can't type in a bill number. You have to know the committee name. So in order for me to find how to do a witness slip, I first have to go to ilga.gov, find which committee it's assigned to. Then I have to go to the myilg.gov and look up the committee hearings. And then I have to look at each committee hearing to see which date that bill is being looked at, to actually click on the witness slip and file the witness slip. So like we all said, for that one that I sent out, I found it and I had the link and I could send it to everybody. But it is like a wrapped around the wheel trying to find where it is to actually assign that witness slip. So I guess I'm thinking, and maybe I'm wrong, but is there somebody in the state, you know, League of Women Voters IL who would be able to give us the witness slip class and something about how the bill passes?
We'll
I would
investigate.
think somebody knows, but I do not know for sure.
No.
There is a chart on the LWVIL website on the process for how a bill gets passed in Illinois. It's a very complicated chart, but it's thorough. So there may be somebody from the state league who understands that.
And didn't we just get something that there's going to be something new on the Illinois website about tracking bills? We did.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
We just came out, or maybe they mentioned it last week at President's Chat, but I cannot find it in front of me right now, so I'm sorry, but I will try to look that up. It's called Bill something. Carol, do you remember that?
I remember talking about it, but I don't have it in front of me either.
I don't either. So maybe that will answer some of our questions. I'll try to find that information.
Yeah.
And
But
let
now we're doing meetings by Zoom. There should be somebody, even if they're up north, that could, you know, in quotes, come to our meeting and give us a tutorial on some of these
Right.
issues.
I agree. That would be very helpful.
Who was leading Katie Stewart sessions? Her?
Yes. She had her aide teach us how to do witness slips,
Mhm.
but unfortunately, she was mostly teaching us how to do myilga.gov and didn't really address how to find the right committee. And
Right.
that's what I told them. I said, that's what I'm having the most problems with.
And even
And,
Katie Stewart said that the best way to find a bill that you're concerned about is to find a group that cares about that, like NAACP or ACLU, and follow them, and they will tell you what bills and send you the links for how to do a witness slip, because your normal human can find them on their own. And the fact that she even said that, it's like, oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, talking about Rochelle Crow and Katie Stewart reminded me, as I was looking at my calendar, that there's a document shredding event sponsored by them on this Saturday from 9 to noon at Edwardsville High School. I don't know if anybody has gotten a notice about that, but it is
That's
happening.
electronics recycling and shredding both, isn't it?
yes.
I think it is. Yeah.
And it's this Saturday. I'm going to be there.
Saturday, 9 to 5, 9 to noon.
Yes. I put it on our Facebook page.
Right. I saw it there. Right. So, and I think it said the teacher's parking lot, which I'm assuming is the one to the east. But
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
the smaller one.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
They have done this before in April. Well, I think it's a big thing with Earth Day and the end of tax season, etc. So that's why they do it.
Okay. Is there any more discussion?
I've got something kind of related to redistricting, but it's kind of an offshoot, and I just wanted to kind of put this out there. If anyone would like a game, I bought this game through Kickstarter about a year ago. It's on redistricting, and it's developed by a couple of high school kids, and it is amazing. If you want to learn how redistricting really works, I mean, it's a devious, simple to learn, enlightening game. You can look it up on Amazon, and they've got reviews of it, and teachers have used it in classrooms. I know I'm not going to use it. I'm just kind of here alone here. If anyone has some kids or knows, I was thinking we could use this as a fundraiser or something, because it really does show you very quickly how small decisions can really make a big impact for redistricting. So if anybody would like it or knows anybody who could make use of it, or you've got a bunch of kids or even adults you want to get together and play games, let me know. You can have it. It's just sitting
Does it
here.
have a lot of little pieces?
It does. It's kind of like Parcheesi as far as the little pieces.
I was going to say maybe I wonder if the library has something like that, but they probably wouldn't get all their pieces back.
No.
Yeah,
But
maybe
you
maybe
can
if
add
we,
door prize for the annual meeting.
Well, that's an idea. Yeah.
Or
Although
we
Well,
could
you
have,
know,
things might be
yeah,
over by then.
You know, we could pick a name or something.
Okay.
we could have a meeting and have teams, and when we're all are meeting together, even though we might be masked, we could have, you know, a couple of teams and play.
That's what I was thinking, or even like a trivia night and have a map making night instead of it. But as long as we can't get together, it's just been sitting here in my study.
I mean, is it made definitely for children or? of
No,
all
no. It was invented by some homeschooled high
Oh,
school
okay.
kids, and
All
they
right.
did it on Kickstarter. And it's really for high school through adults, actually for ages 8 and up. So an 8-year-old could play it, sort of, can kind of catch on, but really it's an adult game.
Okay.
I said gerrymandering.
Okay. Well, thank you, Barb and Brett. I found it very interesting. And thank you, Becky, for making it all possible. So,
Thank you for the work. That's tremendous amount of work and excellent report and
Right.
Yes, it was very good. Thank you.
excellent.
then
And
we
watch out for ticks, everybody, because I had a bad tick bite on my back. So
Really?
no, they're out there and
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'll see you guys later.
we will see
Bye.
you all again.
Hi, so we'll see you all.